President-elect Biden outlining a nearly $2 trillion spending plan to try and combat the virus and the economic downturn. Eamon Javers joins us right now. He has more on the details on that plan. Eamon, good morning.
Yeah, good morning, Becky. You're right. The total here is $1.9 trillion from the Biden plan. What they're saying is they're going to divide their relief efforts into two phases. The first one is what they're calling the American Rescue Plan. That's this initial $1.9 trillion, but there's more behind that, they say. They're going to have a recovery plan later in the first 100 days. That, they say, will be an additional amount of money, and that will be focused on infrastructure and building and creating jobs for the future. But this initial rescue plan, they say, is going to be centered around spending around COVID relief, vaccinations, and ending the virus. They say in talking to the Trump transition, they found out that things are much worse than they could have anticipated in terms of the virus relief plan. There's no national plan, they said, simply for getting the vaccines into arms of Americans across the country. A big chunk of this funding here is going to be focused on that. Take a look at the details here. $400 billion for COVID relief overall, $20 billion toward that vaccine program, $50 billion for testing expansion, $30 billion for supplies and protective gear, of which they say the United States still nearly a year in doesn't have nearly enough, $170 billion for K-12 schools and colleges. Biden says he wants to get schools reopened in his first 100 days. Direct aid to Americans, nearly $1 trillion here. They want to plus up those direct stimulus checks by $1,400, giving you a total with the last bill and this bill of the $2,000 that Democrats have been pushing for. $400 a week in federal unemployment insurance, $30 billion in rental assistance. The president-elect says he wants to push for a $15 an hour minimum wage. He says that workers on the front lines, those essential workers, have been risking their lives, and he says they deserve a $15 an hour minimum wage. And also that aid to states and localities that was one of the stumbling blocks in the negotiations over the last stimulus, that's in here as well at $350 billion in aid to state and local governments, $50 billion for small business grants and loans to help some of those small businesses recover. A specific focus here on bars and restaurants, which have been so badly hit, as we all know. And then $20 billion here for public transit. They say they're going to focus on the transit agencies that have been most hard hit in the course of the pandemic to make sure they don't have to have a massive wave of layoffs and service reductions that would further hurt the economy. So, guys, the big question now is, can this pass up on Capitol Hill? And I was interested in a conference call with senior Biden officials yesterday. They were asked about the prospects on Capitol Hill and whether they had enough support in the Senate, which will be very, very narrowly divided under the Biden administration. And what they said was they've been talking to governors and mayors about this. And I thought that was an interesting answer, not necessarily talking about their push to the senators, but talking about those governors and mayors who are on the front lines dealing with this crisis day to day. It seems like the Biden team thinks those state and local officials will lean on their senators in Washington to get this done because they're most familiar with the scale of the challenges that each of these states are facing, guys. Back over to you.
Hey, Eamon, we've talked so much about budget reconciliation and how if they were to use budget reconciliation, they would only need 51 votes to get this passed in the Senate. Is that the plan they're taking? I'd read so much yesterday about how he was hoping to do bipartisan and get 60 votes to get this passed. Yep. What do you think is going to happen? Because I could see people on the right and people on the far left also not being happy with this plan.
Yeah, they're not talking about budget reconciliation for this first one. They think that they can pass this on the merits, which would mean they would need at least 10 Republican senators to cross the aisle and vote with them on that. They think that there might be that kind of support given the urgent need out there in the country for this and the focus really narrowly tailored on states, localities, and virus vaccine rollout plans here. All of that they think can attract some votes. They're not entirely sure they've got the votes just yet, but they seem to be holding that budget reconciliation for the next round, which will be that recovery plan. Which will be
I read yesterday that you can't do the state and local government aid through budget reconciliation. So they got to try to do some horse trading to get to 60 votes. So that wouldn't solve that problem. So you got to
and
do
the
some
other
horse trading and
the other thing you've got is you've got a bunch of tax increases. The Biden team has a bunch of tax increases that they want to put through. That's going to come in that second plan, budget. And obviously that's going to attract less Republican votes, and so you use budget reconciliation for that to get those tax increases through on a majority vote only, and that's that they think they can do.
We just did 900, and now we're doing, what, 1.9, so we're up to 2.8. That's a lot more than what no one could agree to in the waning months of 2020. We're at 2.8, right. And we couldn't do.
And what Biden is banking on is that you've got a new Congress.
2-2, right? Didn't they pass 2-2, and then Republicans said that's a non-starter. So now we're not at 2-2 anymore. We're finally ending up at 2.8.
Yeah, and look, I mean, I think that 1.9 figure is significant, right? It's under 2. 2 seems to be sort of the political breaking point. So this is like that deal when you say, you know, it's $9.99. It's not $10.
Yeah, exactly.
That product costs you $9.99, right? So you get it under that psychological threshold. I think there's some politics in the grand total number that they came up with to make it a little bit more palatable. But you're right. It's an enormous amount of money. The Biden argument is, you know, if you don't do this now, the economy is going to be worse for years and years, and you're going to be digging yourself out of an epic hole, and there'll be just a simple tragedy economically for Americans and their families going forward.
Shepard Smith here. Thanks for watching CNBC on YouTube.